Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
Long night of work last night, guys, and woke up this morning really excited for the World Junior Championship. Just a day of not thinking about Red Wings hockey, not thinking about the doom and gloom that we've been going through these last couple months. And I just wanted to sit on the couch and watch Axel Sandin Pellikka. That's all I wanted to do today. And what do you know? We finally get the news, the long overdue news that we've kind of been sensing was coming for quite some time now, that Derek Lalonde was finally fired. And we're going to get into that a lot today. So welcome to episode 16 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. I am your co-host, Evan Sabrin, along with Devin Little, George Malik, and Tony Wolak. Guys, big day. Big day. A lot of changes here, and it's, optimism reigns supreme with this team now. Maybe we can get a little spark here for a team that has been struggling so bad it's beyond imagination. Before we get started, guys, I'd like to remind you where you can find us: on YouTube, on Spotify, on iTunes. We're also on Blue Sky and Threads. So give us a follow, Flying Octopus. We're here to answer all your questions. Tony, I'm just curious, man. Like it's kind of crazy when you wake up to news like that. You're not really thinking it. It's the holidays, the roster freeze has been going on. And what did you think when you heard it?
It's kind of funny. So, on East Coast time, the news dropped around noon. My wife and I went to go get sushi today because we both had the day off. And it's funny. The last time we went to this sushi place we love. Shout out Passion Fin. You're great.
Are they sponsoring us really quick? No?
Okay. I hope so. Can't we? Passion Fin, are you up for it? Anyway, so the last time we went to get sushi at this place, that was the same day where I dropped the article about, just the Red Wings need to consider a coaching change. And that was I think Veterans Day back in November. And it wasn't, they should fire Lalonde now. It was, hey, things aren't going super well. Let's start asking these hard questions. And I remember, while we enjoyed the sushi, it was great. I was, it was just kind of a weird feeling because right before we walked in, I was getting a ton of pushback on social, just disagreeing with the assessment, and just kind of, there's some personal attacks with it too, which, it comes with the territory, I guess. But it's just a weird feeling, just, putting yourself out there with an article with just your own viewpoint, and getting some strange feedback in return. But anyway, so we walk in, we sit down, we're talking, and then I go to order, and my wife looks down at her phone and then just turns it around. And it's the Red Wings Instagram post that they have hired Todd McLellan and fired Derek Lalonde. If you go back to the article I put up on Veterans Day, it was, hey, we might need to consider a coaching change. And if the Red Wings do, Todd McLellan would be my top choice for this reason and this reason and this reason. So I was shocked. I was shocked that the Red Wings finally made the move. I was shocked that it was McLellan, who I'd been pushing for. And I was shocked that we were in the same place as when, this thing first started. So again, shout out Passion Fin. Your sushi was great again today, but it's just interesting how life came full circle with the news that dropped today.
Let's make sure we tag that sushi place in today's tweets.
For sure.
And maybe we can get a sponsorship. Yeah. Passion Fin.
Sponsored.
Flying Octopus brought to you by Passion Fin.
Do I'll get sushi if that's the case? Pivoting here. Crazy story there, Tony. It is kind of crazy how things come full circle, and it's not really a small world thing, but what are the odds, right? That's crazy. But yeah, like you guys have said, that's the news in Hockey Town right now. Derek Lalonde out, Todd McLellan back in, and I say back in because longtime Red Wings fans will probably recognize him as during his time as an assistant coach on Mike Babcock's coaching staff, specifically during their Cup run in 2008. Todd McLellan is a Stanley Cup champion with the Detroit Red Wings. I'm sure that was on his mind when he accepted the job. And for the record, he's been much more than an assistant coach since 2008. He has a long record of being a head coach in the NHL. Again, Red Wings fans might remember him as the head coach of the San Jose Sharks from 2008 until 2015. He was the head coach of those San Jose teams that knocked the Red Wings out in the playoffs in both 2010 and 2011. I remember being a teenager and really disliking that San Jose Sharks team led by Todd McLellan because they just were so darn good. And then after spending some time with the Sharks, he very quickly found a new job with the Edmonton Oilers, was actually Connor McDavid's first coach in the NHL. He was drafted in 2015. 2015 was McLellan's first year with the Oilers. Spent some time there and then was hired by the LA Kings in 2019, spent some time there, was let go a little over halfway through last season. And that brings us to now. He's now the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings. And now that I've kind of laid out where he's been and all that good stuff, let's talk about who he is. Todd McLellan is obviously a veteran coach. He's coached over 1,000 games in the NHL. And with that, he's also coached plenty of playoff games. He has a track record of getting teams to the playoffs. I actually had a small interaction with somebody online today about if he's won the Stanley Cup or not. And while he's never won the Stanley Cup, he routinely gets teams to the playoffs. And the Red Wings haven't been to the playoffs since the Obama administration. So I would say that getting to the playoffs is probably a good first step. Let's talk about the cup some time later. And also probably the biggest thing, and I know that you're going to talk about this, Evan, accountability. Accountability is big with this guy. He isn't afraid to call out individuals. He's not afraid to call out the team when things just aren't up to standard. And I do think that with that standard, he's going to raise the standard in Detroit. Just from my perspective, it seemed like, Yzerman really issued the mandate of being better defensively this season. And I think that Derek Lalonde and Bob Boughner really took that to heart, but it's like they forgot the other side of the game because they did some good things defensively. They had some good bend, don't break stuff going on, but they just never possessed the puck. They dumped it in like almost as their first option, and then they wouldn't chase it. You can't dump and chase if you don't chase. And they maybe made some strides defensively, but they were always defending. And the thing about always defending is that it doesn't matter how good at defending you are. Eventually the puck's going to go in. It's just law of averages. So I wish nothing but the best to Derek Lalonde. I think he's a really, really good-hearted person. I think he communicates really well, especially when talking to the media. And I think that he's a brilliant hockey mind. It was obviously his first time being a head coach in the NHL. I think he learned some valuable lessons, and I think he'll land on his feet. I'm sure someone will give him a job. He might even end up back in Tampa Bay. I'm sure John Cooper would be happy to have him back. But this was a needed change, as has been said. And for the record, too, not only did it hit the mark that we've been talking about of having an outside voice come in and take a look at this team, but it's an outside voice with experience. And that's very notable because Steve Yzerman has never hired a coach with prior NHL experience. So that just really speaks to the fact that this team needed an experienced hand behind the bench because despite Derek Lalonde's best efforts, he just wasn't getting it done. And Todd McLellan has a track record of getting it done.
And that's good too for like accountability purposes. And I know, Evan, that was something that you were talking about before the show, about something that's like high on your list for a new coach.
Yeah, it's a bittersweet day because you never want to root for somebody to lose their job. It's not like Derek Lalonde was this bad guy or whatever. I just don't think he was the right voice for this team. And I always talk about that when you see post-game interviews or in between intermission interviews, it always feels to me like he's finding a silver lining or finding something good in the games. Well, the way this team is playing, there's not a lot of silver linings to look forward through. And I always feel like he's not I want a passionate leader. I want somebody who's like, in your face, like, hey, let's get this shit going. Let's not sugarcoat it. Let's hold guys accountable. Let's tell it like it is. And I've always never felt that way with Lalonde. Now, that doesn't mean he's a bad guy, like I said, or didn't dislike him by any means. And again, it sucks when someone loses their job. But I think you bring in a guy like McLellan, who's going to bring some passion, and he's going to bring some fire behind that bench. And if there's any team in the NHL that needs this, not named the Buffalo Sabres, it's the Detroit Red Wings. So I want you guys to listen to this soundbite really quick, so you can kind of get like the gist of what I'm trying to say, because this is the kind of talk I want to hear in a post-game interview.
I don't know if there's a number big enough for how to describe how disappointing that effort is. We've been together for 200 days. And talked a lot about competing and working hard and holding your hand and showing up, and we get that. And that's the exact crap that we're trying to eradicate from this group. So you work hard, you climb, and you climb, and you climb, at least get some foundation, and you give it all back in one night. And we were outshot, we were out-hit, we were outscored, we were out-face-offed, out-power played, out-penalty killed. Our shift length was terrible. They played 4 games in 6 nights, and we're going to go for 55-second shifts. We turned a puck over 1:10 into a shift and then cheated on a change. We had a center change for a center who happened to be 2 zones away. I don't know how that can happen. So I guess when you sum it all up like that, that's really disappointing, isn't it?
And how important is it for this team to give this town a game to celebrate on?
Well, it's damn important. After that crap, damn important that there's an effort. Forget about the win and the loss, but just the effort. That's frickin' embarrassing.
That's the kind of energy I want to hear. I want to hear somebody saying this isn't good enough. We've got to improve. There's going to be accountability behind that bench, and this is a great hire, Tony. Just like your article said, George. What do you think about this signing? Like I'm pretty fired up about it.
I feel like it's almost Yzerman gets his coach part 2, because if you look at it, Lalonde was part 1. Lalonde was trying to accentuate the positive. Lalonde was trying to be positive, to give the guys positive reinforcement, and for lack of a better term, boost the roster that it was not necessarily a fantastic roster to begin with, to sort of be that teacher that says, you can do it, guys. But eventually that gets stale. And eventually I think that Yzerman came to realize that the Red Wings, they didn't need Mike Babcock part 2, but they needed a taskmaster, somebody who says this starts with me, just like you have Dylan Larkin always saying this, and we haven't played well enough, and I'm one of those players, and I need to step up. You get in McLellan, you get more experience. I mean, Lalonde had had coaching experience. In McLellan, you get the track record that is well established. God, I hated those San Jose teams with Marlowe and Thornton in their prime. I mean, he's plays a style that is hard to play against, that is a pain in the ass to play against. And although I still think that this has to be step 1, I think we can all agree that this has to be the beginning of at least a moderate overhaul of the roster over the course of the regular season, and then as we go up to the trade deadline, and then, of course, the off season when the team is going to have some money with which to make some changes. But I don't know. For me, it goes full circle too. I don't want to go on for too long because I know we have a tendency to do that. I have a tendency to do that. God knows. But anyway, I remember 2008 Stanley Cup parade. Before I got to go to Chelly's and drink from the Stanley Cup, thanks to Chris Draper and Chris Osgood, I remember being in front of the Fox Theater knowing that the San Jose Sharks were courting McLellan, because that was the news that morning before I left for the parade, and yelling to McLellan, "Stay, please stay," because he was doing such a fantastic job as an assistant, and he didn't stay. So if you want to talk about a full circle moment, he was negotiating with the Sharks that morning before the parade and got hired the next day. So I definitely remember him leaving and being pissed off that I felt the best assistant coach the Red Wings had left. So, for me, this is definitely a full circle moment too. And I don't think we're going to get sponsored by the Fox Theater, but it's a really nice place to watch the parade.
These are the kind of stories we need, George. I'm not even interested in the McLellan movie now. I'm interested in you drinking at Chelly's out of the Stanley Cup.
And Brett Lebda dropping it. I heard it.
Yeah, I want to get into that in a cold open in another episode, George. These are the stories you got to let us know about in advance, because that's
fair.
Sounds pretty fascinating.
It was.
We've had some good names so far. Dropping Brett Lebda. We talked about Kevin McLellan before the episode started. We're on a great Oku, just another sponsor potentially episode.
We're not doing another jersey giveaway, are we?
Don't blow it with passion, Finn. Okay, just keep it together.
Yeah. But let's get back. Well, there's more to talk about McLellan for sure, but I do want to kind of just jump back to why this move was needed. So, what really, for me at least, what really signaled that something was going to happen soon was the quote that Dylan Larkin had after the St. Louis game earlier this week. And just for those who didn't hear it or didn't read it, it goes like this. So Larkin said, "When you show up to play, you've got to show up to play. And we don't have enough guys doing that right now, myself included. We've got to be committed to compete, and we're just not doing that. We're very disconnected. The forwards from the D on the ice, wingers from the centermen, it's just all over. There's just a lot of disconnect." And in my head, seeing that after game 34, I'm like, that's not good. That's really not good. That is not at all that is not a good indictment of how this team is being coached, how the strategy is being shared and digested by the team. That is not good. And, a couple of days later, Yzerman made the move. But the fact of the matter is that, there was a disconnect. The personnel and the strategy, they just did not mix at all. And Devin mentioned it before, the dump and chase strategy that the Red Wings had been, utilizing this season as the go-to for zone entries. It didn't match the players that they had, and their retrieval rate, made perfectly aligned to that. All three zones had a retrieval rate out of 3.58 per 60, which is by far the worst in the league. So yeah, when you see that and there's that much of a disconnect, and then watch the Red Wings try to defend in their own end with some man coverage that they put together, where you have your guy and it doesn't matter if Seider's up by the point and Alex DeBrincat's by the front of the net, you have your guy. That, to me, this team was not built for that. And I was, a little surprised it took this long, but change needed to happen, because I feel like the perspective for the Red Wings, for the coaching staff, was execute the game plan. If you execute the game plan, we're going to have success. And if you don't execute the game plan, then we're not going to succeed. And until you execute the game plan to perfection, things aren't going to work. But it's on you to execute. Which, it's fine if you want to have that approach where it's my way or the highway. But when that strategy, the different components of the strategy, the offense, the defense, the neutral zone, the transition, the defending, the forechecking, all of it combined, when this game plan is just not working, and yet there's no change from the coach to adjust to the players around him, there's no change from the players to uh, execute even better or differently, then change is needed. Like the team was just stuck in a rut of just trying to execute this game plan where they were just boxing themselves in. They couldn't think, it didn't allow for high hockey IQ plays to come about and, get the Red Wings in a better spot in the offensive zone. It was dump the puck in, retrieve it, cycle, work it low to high, get a shot, get a rebound, pick, and then, just continuing on from there, like following this templated plan. And it just wasn't working. And, finally that we got the change. And I know, like, Devin, this is something that, like, you and I have been talking about, like, offline for a while now, of like, change was needed because there was no change happening at any level throughout the season.
It was insanely frustrating too, right? I love your point here about just the lack of adapting and the lack of change. Because I think, so for me personally, I don't think a great hockey coach has one system that they teach to every team and they master and blah, blah, blah. No, I think great NHL coaches have many systems that they can implement based on the rosters that they have, because there's no such thing as a one size fits all system. At least I don't believe there is. And I think that that's one of the things that Derek Lalonde will take from his first time being a NHL head coach is that you got to be adaptable. When things aren't working, it's not about changing the lineup a little bit. It's about trying a new system. It's about trying new things. And that's actually one of the reasons why I'm a lot softer on Jeff Blashill than some others are, because, watch the Red Wings in Jeff Blashill's first season and then watch the Red Wings 4 years later. They're not playing the same type of hockey. And it's because the team changed. Blashill had to adapt. They don't have the same amount of talent. So how do you put yourself in a better position to win? You adapt the strategy, you adapt the system. And that's what Blashill did. That's what Todd McLellan has a track record of doing. And that's what Derek Lalonde didn't do. And that's ultimately what brought us to this day right here. Now, on another note, real quick, I think it deserves its own little bullet point here. It wasn't just Derek Lalonde that lost his job. It was Bob Boughner, too. And, we spent a lot of time talking about how horrible the penalty kill has been this year. There's a good stretch of time there where it was on pace to be the worst of all time. And a lot of, he wasn't just in charge of the penalty kill. He's a big voice in terms of handling the defensemen and just dealing with their defensive scheme. So this is a big indictment, not just on Derek Lalonde and his leadership style. It's an indictment on the team's overall defensive play, which is crazy because that was the big thing to focus on heading into this season. And clearly,
the funny thing about the penalty kill is we've been going through a stretch where it's been a little better, but then when you get where things are at, it's still at 68.8%, effective, which is 31st in the league. Haven't cracked 70% yet. Like, that's still pretty bad. Like, it's
still not good enough. And from a guy that has NHL, Bob Boughner's been around in the NHL. It's not like he was figuring things out. He has some experience to draw from. So I think that, this isn't just a leadership change. This isn't just a potential culture change. It is a schematic change. Trent Yawney was brought in with Todd McLellan. He's been a longtime assistant for Todd McLellan, and he's probably going to step right into Bob Boughner's spot of running that penalty kill. So I don't know that it's going to be a quick turnaround. The next time we see the Wings, they're going to look like a completely different team. But let's check back in maybe 2 or 3 weeks and just see if the penalty kill just looks even average, because I would not be surprised if it does.
For me, the square peg into the triangular hole, or however you want to put it, square peg, round hole, whatever, the concept that this was not working came to me when Lalonde would repeatedly say, but my players don't necessarily have that DNA. He would repeatedly say, that's not in our DNA, but we have to do it. And, he was so very determined to make sure that the Red Wings were going to win low-scoring games, that they were going to check the snot out of the opponent man on man, that while you're watching the man-on-man system break down in overtime and the Red Wings lose points because guys would get lost on exchanges, eventually, if the DNA isn't right for you, either you have to tell the general manager who you speak with every day to make some changes, or you have to change. And we didn't get either one. There was no personnel change, and there was no coaching adaptation to what the roster was. Mike Babcock complained like a whiny little you-know-what about not having enough right-handed defensemen. Throughout his tenure with the Red Wings, it was, even when when eventually they had one righty, one lefty, one righty, one lefty, one righty, one lefty on every defensive pair, he'd still complain about it a little bit. But for lack of a better term, it's just about adaptation to me. It's about understanding what you have in front of you and maximizing the talent that you have, maximizing the work ethic that you have, maximizing the responsibility and the buy-in. And I think that it was most clear, we're talking about a team that's lost 9 of 12. We're talking about a team that going into this, and is on a 3-game losing streak, going into tomorrow's game versus Toronto. I was reading a Toronto press. They were already saying, well, gee, how are the Leafs going to exploit the fact that the Red Wings have a new coach? And
about the Leafs.
Yeah, it's always about the Leafs 110% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. But
hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, let's transition a bit to talk a little bit about what Todd McLellan brings to the table. It will probably take a little bit of time to see any significant change, at least from a strategy standpoint, because coaches don't just come in and make a bunch of changes. You need time to implement that, to drill that in, to create buy-in with the players, gain that trust. So it's going to be a little bit, but at the very least, McLellan's going to come in, have a fresh voice, a fresh perspective, and the Red Wings can loosen up a little bit because they've been stuck trying to, execute this game plan that didn't work, and just knowing that some sort of change was bound to happen, and then finally it does, and they can kind of just put their shoulders down a little, be like, all right, it's time to go back to work, But as far as McLellan goes, there is a lot to like about his track record. And the one thing that stands out to me is that wherever he's coached, his teams have always been strong from for generating rush chances. So if you remember back to last season, this is how the Red Wings, created so much offense. Their scoring went through the roof. And it looked unsustainable because their shooting percentage was very, very high. It's because they kept getting quality chances and converting on those from rush chances, and for gaining possession and then coming in on odd man rushes quickly and converting on it. McLellan has done a great job with instilling strategies and game plans and highlighting players' hockey IQ, where you can identify, when opponents are coming through the neutral zone, ways to step in to create turnovers and quickly transition that up ice for a rush chance or an odd man chance. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to seeing the Red Wings get back to that, instead of, gaining possession, dumping it in, and then going and chasing after it. More quick attack offense. Another trait of his, and this I guess you can credit to both McLellan and Trent Yawney, as well as, at least in Los Angeles, they did a really great job of just denying zone entries and making opponents, dump the puck in themselves instead of just carrying it in or passing it in. The Red Wings, their defense, they make it easy, have been making it easy for opponents to gain the blue line. That's just how it's been. And they'll let them game zone entry, they'll let them set up, and they just try to keep it to the outside for low danger chances. That's been the game plan. But McLellan, there's this new perspective of, hey, why don't we stop them from gaining the zone and then quickly transition the puck up ice? It's a way to, at least in my opinion, kind of hide the fact that Detroit's defense beyond Simon Edmondson and Mort Seider is below replacement level. If you're not in the defensive zone as much, that won't get exploited as much. So at least for me, there's hope given their track record that this team could kind of turn it around and maximize their talents and hide some of their flaws and creating more rush attack chances and also stopping more, carry and passing and zone entries.
Building upon that, just for the amateur eye test, the Red Wings have been built as a team with a lot of speed up front, and they have been a team that has given their opponents far too much speed going into their own zone in terms of their defensive strategy. It isn't necessarily that the Red Sea parts and there go the Pilgrims down the road to the goal, but it's pretty close, and even when you don't want to when you don't necessarily talk about strategy, when you're talking about just the feel of the team playing or not playing the system, when you have a fast team, you have a team with fast forwards, and at least you have one good defensive pair with a good transition game, and you're not using it. And when you have a team that is just for whatever reason not standing up at the blue line, you're talking about systemic changes that need to happen that are obvious to everybody, and I guess that's one thing that I look at about McLellan, from just a cursory glance that stands out to me. And I guess the other thing that we haven't talked about that we wanted to talk about was just that this has to be part one of some sort of overhaul of the roster. Now, when I was talking about Yzerman being methodical a couple episodes ago, again, I'm not expecting half the roster to be traded over the course of the regular season heading up to the trade deadline. That's not how it works, especially with guys with so many guys with remaining years on their contract and so many guys who are, let's say, mediocre. But if they could make one or two good trades up front to bring in some skill, to bring in some snarl, to bring in somebody who could work well at the net front, and then bring in somebody either to spare Seider some of those D minutes, as I've been preaching, or perhaps somebody just to Gostisbehere 2.0, even if you're willing to deal with the lack of defense from a defenseman in order to bring in some sort of puck movement up the ice from the blue line that isn't Jeff Petrie and Ben Chirot doing the best they can do. That's where you have to go. You have to start making some roster changes, and I'm really curious. Yzerman is going to speak to the media while we're recording this on Friday morning, and I want to hear him talk about the roster. I doubt we will, because the Red Wings don't telegraph their changes, but something needs to change on the roster as well as the coaching staff. It's not just bring in McLellan and Yawney and everything's going to be all right.
I agree. I do think there can be some changes to the roster, but one thing to me that stands out to me was Red Wings, they hired McLellan and they signed him to a multi-year deal. This was not letting go of the head coach and naming one of the assistants the interim. This is Yzerman saying, I believe in this team still, and I think with this different coach, I think we can still have success. If he didn't, have that faith, then he probably would have, slapped an interim tag on someone and then just let the season ride out and then use the offseason to make, grander changes. So even if they're just small tweaks, in the coming weeks to the roster, I think what Yzerman's signaling so far is that he still has belief in the team. And frankly, I think they do have enough talent to be incrementally better than they were last season. It's just a matter of maximizing it, which they most certainly haven't this season. But speaking of talent, we're going to transition now to the World Junior Championships. And it was quite a first day for Red Wings prospects. And we'll start with Axel Sandin Pellikka. Devin, what did you see out of Detroit's top defensive prospect, apart from a hat trick and an assist and captaining Sweden to a 5-2 victory over Slovakia?
Oh, just 3 goals.
None of the middle stuff.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, nothing crazy, anything. No, I think I saw a prospect that saw a really prominent pundit out there say that he tops out as a number 3 defenseman, and he was like, "Ha! I'll show you."
Wheeler.
Cough, cough. Yeah, Axel Sandin Pellikka is going to be special. I'm not going to say that he's going to be a number 1 all-star elite Quinn Hughes, whatever you want to call it, defenseman, but I think 3D is maybe a little bit of a low ball. But hey, I guess if you shoot low, you can be right when it goes high, I guess. There's a reason why I've personally been really high on Axel Sandin Pellikka, and whenever I've ranked the Red Wings prospects, I've always had him ranked ahead of Nate Danielson, even though Danielson was drafted ahead of ASP, or Axel Sandin Pellikka, is because Sandin Pellikka has there's certain players that have that it factor. It's hard to quantify. It's hard to point at anything specific and say this guy's elite because of this, or this guy's going to be a stud because of that. Sandin Pellikka he's just got, as the kids are saying nowadays, he's just got aura. He just makes things happen. He's a defenseman scoring a hat trick in a national tournament. Who does that? I think that
it's the weak team either.
And right, yeah. It's not like he was beating up on no name team. Yeah, exactly.
He is tomorrow, though. He's beating up on Kazakhstan tomorrow, I think. Stay tuned. No, I think Sandin Pellikka this season, because it's not just the World Juniors, right? It's he's still playing over in Sweden in the SHL. He's really proven himself to be a pro defenseman. He's going to make things happen. He likes to play with the puck on his stick. He can make things happen at both ends of the ice. You definitely want him more in an offensive role than a defensive role, but he's not lost in his own zone. And I just think that, I always go back to his draft year, and people were always kind of comparing him to Chris Letang. And usually I don't like those comparisons. I think they're a little bit off, but honestly, I really like the Chris Letang comparison. And honestly, if the Wings move forward with Moritz Snyder and a Chris Letang type on the right side, and then you throw Simon Edvinsson in there too, I don't know how you're not excited. I get that this season's been extremely frustrating, and prospects only get you so much excited because they're not here right now. But I don't know how you don't look at what Sandin Pellikka did today and what he's been doing just this season and not get warm and fuzzy feeling in your belly.
Let me ask you this though. So Sandin Pellikka has been playing against pros in Sweden all season. He's a man among children at the World Juniors. He still has a smaller frame. And do you think it might take time for him to adjust to North American hockey? Like, let's assume that he starts out in Grand Rapids next season. how long do you think he's knocking on Detroit's door? Just because there is that much like more physical like element of North American hockey, of the AHL, of the NHL. That's the smaller rink. He's playing on it now for the World Juniors in Ottawa, but back in Sweden, against the pros, it's a wider rink space. There's more time to make plays. How do you think he's going to transition based on what you've seen so far?
So I'll start by saying we all know how the Red Wings handle their prospects. Even when everyone seems to think they're ready to go, they will stay in Grand Rapids until the cows come home, or they basically have no choice, or everyone's ready to rip Yzerman's head off or something. So even when we think he's ready, he will probably still be with the Griffins. But that aside, I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that he's knocking on the door by the end of next season. I kind of keep going back to Simon Edvinsson when I think about Pellikka and what his trajectory could look like and how he's going to be handled. Because again, last season, all of us were like, Edvinsson should be up. Edvinsson should be up. He had that one good year in Grand Rapids. He doesn't need another year in Grand Rapids. What are we doing? And then he came up in the end of the year and looked like he belonged. So
were we right? We were right.
We were right. Go figure, right? So I think that, I'll stick with that. I think he's knocking on the door by the end of next season, and he might even get some games. And I think that there's going to be a lot of people that think should be up a lot sooner than he is. But the kid, like I said, the kid's got it. I think it's really going to come down to what they do in the off season, what they add on that blue line. Because if they add, a big money contract in one way or another, that's a significant roadblock, right? And they're going to use that whole, if Pellikka's coming up, he's going to play big minutes. They're not going to put him on the third line and have him play 16 minutes. They want him to play 20 or more. And he's not going to get that if they sign a big free agent on that blue line, especially a right-handed one. So what they do will dictate it big time, but yeah, I think that we're all going to be chomping at the bit to see him with the Red Wings. I mean, we're already there. Let's be honest, but we're really going to be ready to go a year and a half from now.
So he's one of those prospects that you would say a season or less in Grand Rapids, right?
Yeah.
The thing that impressed me the most about him today is, he's still doing that. I'm gonna reset, and I'm gonna go back to the blue line and take a spin instead of deciding to go right to the net and slap the puck right on the net and go and essentially use my shot as a forechecking weapon. But at the same time, what he was doing is everything was on the inside, from his goals on the, at the face-off dot, at the Ovechkin spot, to his passes and keep-ins. Everything, you expect a Swedish player who's playing on that 100-foot wide ice, when it's almost like soccer on ice when you watch these guys peel back and button hook, because they can simply, they have the time and they have the space with which to really reset and go for the perfect opportunity. There wasn't so much of that with him. There was a lot of urgency to his game, and you want to see that, As far as the Americans are concerned, we have several more prospects to talk about here. Obviously, Sandin Pellikka is going to get the headlines, but Trey Augustine had and the Americans, they had an okay game today. Augustine gave up 4 goals, but that does happen. I would say, by the amount of goals that he gave up, it's okay. I read a quote from David Carl that said, we did a lot of teaching today, which is what you want to hear. I didn't see as much of Max Plant or Plante, depending on how you are pronouncing it. I'll defer to you guys as to Plant, and how he looked. But as a playmaker, he really does impress me. And as somebody who's coming off a broken hand and is probably still in a splint, the fact that the United States team chose to keep him in is pretty damn impressive. Now, as we're recording, we're going to talk about Jesse Kiiskinen, because the Finns are playing Canada as well, and he's not been as evident, but it's the Finns playing Canada in the first game, and when you've got Kiiskinen, you're talking about somebody who has been on a very bad team, but has been near or atop the scoring lead because he has been one of the best players on a very bad HBK Hämeenlinna team in the Finnish Liga. And the Finnish Liga is really impressive in that they do the hybrid ice. I'm just going to go on the aside for a minute. What they do is, instead of playing on the 100-foot wide Olympic ice, they play on 92 or 93-foot wide ice. And so, although it's certainly not as strong as the SHL in terms of quality of competition, it's a more North American game. And there are more checks in the Finnish Liga. There are more fights. If you guys are into fights, that's the league you want to watch, because they get aggressive. And Kiiskinen has some fight in him. He's not somebody that's going to drop the gloves, but he is a tenacious forward, and he is playing on the first line right now in the Canada Finland game, which is 2-0 as I'm talking, because the Finns are playing the Finnish trap.
Yeah, and from what I saw of Kiiskinen before I came downstairs for us to record tonight, you're right. He does have he is kind of an aggressive player, and that's what you want to see with Detroit's prospects. You have a lot of high talent, high IQ, high energy players, and Kiiskinen fits right in with them. Andy brings size. Andy brings a little bit of tenacity, as you said, to his game. So I'm excited to see a little bit more of him in this tournament. I thought, and at least from the little bit that I saw earlier, was that he looked right at home out there among the world's best for that age group, the 17 to 20 age cohort. I wouldn't be surprised if he was in Grand Rapids next season as well. Same with Michael Brown-Signigar, same with Trey Augustine. Like, Griffins might be a wagon next season, guys. But over to Augustine, I mean, you're right. It was like, it's the first game.
Being okay, there's nothing wrong with it in the first game. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to get used to playing with each other. And even the Americans who tend to play with each other since they're 16 and 17 years of age, there is an adjustment period. And when you give up too many goals, and you've got somebody as demanding as the University of Denver coach David Carl, you're going to get your shit together in short order.
Yeah, and even though Augustine has played in the two prior World Juniors, and this is his third, you're right. Like, it does take time to get used to new teammates, and like, they've had practices, they've had exhibition games, but only 3 of his defensemen were on last year's team. So that means half the defense in front of him, he is still getting comfortable with how they're going to play around him. And like, as far as his game today, it's like, yeah, it was like not his best, obviously, but again, first game, and hopefully improve from here. Some of the goals were just kind of like, you probably want that back, but and at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. And for Max Plante, it was pretty cool to see him have a really nice assist to a backdoor goal for the Americans. almost reminded me of Jonathan Berggren a little bit, just kind of playing off the cycle and then shooting a cross ice rainbow road pass right to backdoor, right on someone's tape, saucing it across the ice for a goal. And it kind of shows, at least for him, he's a little different from some of the traditional Red Wings draft picks that we've seen, of just the high energy, high motor, type of players. He's definitely a very smart hockey player. But he's not going to be that first guy in on the forecheck, which is fine. You need someone to, set up a quality chance after the forecheck. But for playing on the USA's third line, obviously he's not going to be out there in the key moments, not on the power play. There's loads of talent ahead of him on the depth chart, but I thought he was fine, made some good plays, and that's what you want to see for a second round pick, the year after they were drafted. Devin, what did you see from the Americans today?
I think you guys mostly hit all the marks. Again, it's kind of a game you just kind of, do better next time when it comes to Augustine. Not anything necessarily, super concerning going on there, I don't think, at least. And I do think that when it comes to Plante's situation, I'm really excited to see how this tournament goes for him, just because of just the sheer amount of talent that the Americans have on the roster. And I want to see how he looks playing with that talent. Like you guys have said, Plante's a playmaker. That's what he is. He's not going to be, mucking it up and getting the greasy stuff done and doing all that stuff. No, he's at his best when he's able to create, usually from the perimeter, and hit an open seam and create a goal. And that's fine. Like you said, Tony, you're going to have players that specialize in mucking it up and getting into the dirty areas. You're going to have players that don't do that, and their job is to get the puck or do something with the puck once the other guy gets it out of the scrum. So that's fine. And I do like that we're talking about Kiiskinen as well, because he's that type of player that's going to go muck it up and get the puck out. So it's not an issue where you look at the Red Wings prospect pool and you go, they have all these playmakers and no one to go get the puck. They got guys who are going to get the puck. Don't worry. And just to pivot to Kiiskinen a bit more fully here. He's a player that I am liking more and more as I kind of dive deeper and deeper into him. I mean, he plays the type of game that I think is just really easy to get behind. Everybody loves players that do the dirty work. Everybody loves players that specialize in hard work. That's the type of player Kiiskinen is. And he's the type of player that likes to be in on everything. And I don't just mean, pucks on the boards. If a play is there to be made, he wants to be the one to make it. If a play is there to be made, he wants to be the one to finish it. He wants to be in on everything. And it's a kind of greediness that I think good players need to have. I think the best players know they're good, and they kind of lean into it. It's one of the reasons why, even to this day, you see Patrick Kane trying to make plays that maybe he shouldn't make, because once upon a time he could do those and no one else could. And that's what made him great. So I think that we see Kiiskinen have that trait of wanting to just do everything and be in on everything. And he produces when he is in everything. I'm not saying he's going to be Patrick Kane and to, put that disclaimer out there, but I do think he's going to be a good player. He's got that good selfishness in there. So to kind of, neatly tie this up here, you've got a stud Swedish defenseman in Axel Sandin Pellikka showing early on that he was worth that, or at least it seems like he's going to be worth that 17th overall pick that they used on him a year ago. And he's looking like a legitimate stud coming up through the pipeline. You got a couple of Americans that maybe aren't shining like Axel Sandin Pellikka, but they're fine. There's plenty of room to still believe in them, expect even better results than they have had. And for the record, Augustine's fine. I don't want to make it seem like I'm beating up on his. Yeah, I don't want to make it seem like I'm beating up on a relatively poor game. He's fine. And then you got a Finnish guy who doesn't play like a typical Finn. I put air quotes on that because people like to make silly things, say silly things about European players.
Yeah, just Devin, it's amazing how you always say like, oh well, you guys have kind of pretty much said it all. Always finding more meat on the bone for another 3 or 4 minutes of conversation. That is your specialty, buddy. Meat on the bone. Tony with his sushi and you with your meat on the bone. I think we got something here, guys. Also, I'd like to point out that we did not all color coordinate before the show. This was just the most random of instances that we're all wearing black shirts. I don't know what you got going under that beard there, George, but yeah, I think
Fifth Element t-shirt.
It's a what?
Fifth Element t-shirt.
There you go.
From the old science fiction movie with Bruce Willis.
Oh boy. That's an oldie but a goodie.
Yes.
That's not one of the other things that I saw. Did not have that on my bingo card coming up today. But guys, it's going to be an exciting week, and the Red Wings have 4 games before we get back to you. Red Wings on Friday are going to play host to the Maple Leafs. On Sunday, host to the Capitals. And then they're hosting Pittsburgh on Tuesday before they go to Columbus on next Thursday. And we're going to be back with you next Thursday. Great talk, guys, but really enjoying this World Juniors, and I'm really looking forward to diving into a lot of these games this weekend. And once again, you can find us on YouTube at the Flying Octopod. We're also on Twitter, iTunes, Spotify, Blue Sky, Threads. We're everywhere. So please give us a follow. Check us out. We love hearing back from you and getting some, good feedback from whatever we can. Guys, another great show. Appreciate all of you. 16 episodes in. Let's go. That's a Vladimir Konstantinov number of episodes, so it's good. Tony, you talk to your people at Passion Fin, and let's see what we can do here for some sponsorship. Guys, thanks for joining me, man. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.